Ritter Communications presents the NEA Varsity Podcast, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Here are your hosts, Marcus Carlton and Ryan Fletcher.
Hey, everybody. Marcus Carlton, Ryan Fletcher, back here with you for another episode of NEA Varsity Podcast, episode 17. Ryan, happy morning to you, sir.
Happy morning to you, Marcus.
Man, we're coming off of last night. We had Westside and Valley View for second place on the line in the 4A3, and there was another big game in town last night, Blytheville and Brooklyn, big showdown over at Bearcat Arena, and then there was a girls game last night as well, Batesville and Southside going head-to-head for top seed on the girls' side of the bracket, and a lot of action in the 4A3 last night, and you guys have had a couple games since last week when we were here together. Do you want to touch on those real quick?
Yeah, we two last week we had were actually in the 4A3 was Westside Brooklyn. We went over to Brooklyn. That's a big crosstown rivalry. It was a really good ball game until we got early into that fourth quarter. Brooklyn and Westside were tied up. I felt like Brooklyn was doing what they wanted to do in terms of slowing the game down. They were abysmal shooting, though, and I've seen them twice now play and just really struggle shooting the ball, but tied 26, and then all of a sudden Riley Felkins went on a tear, and I mean hitting threes with a hand right in his face. It was nothing that Brooklyn did in terms of just complete breakdown. I mean, they were doing what they needed to do, but he's that good, and he by himself went on a 9-0 run, got the next couple of points off of an assist from him to Andrew Laird, and they ended up putting away Brooklyn and beating them as double digits. I can't remember exactly what the score was, but his ability to just take over a game the way he does is something else. And we really had Dr. Garrett Weaver and I had quite the conversation during the broadcast, because he's averaging, I think, 37 points for the month of January, which is just unbelievable, especially playing in a 4A type level and playing some of the really good teams that they've played. And, I think he very much makes a strong case. Is he the greatest player to ever, dribble a basketball at Westside? And that says a lot coming from the fact that they have a guy playing Division I basketball right now in Avery Felts, and then talk about the Mickelson boy. And I'm not all caught up on all the history of Westside basketball, but bottom line is, in what I've seen, he is quite something. And what I love, and I mentioned about this in our broadcast, what I love about him is that he's very humble. He is not cocky. And that's what I like about Riley more than anything. So bottom line is they took care of business, beat Brooklyn on their home court, a game that Brooklyn gets up for probably more than any. And once again, they got another big win down the stretch. Then on Thursday night, we had our second girls broadcast of the season, and that was Truman and Hoxie. Hoxie's undefeated in the 3A3 conference. Really good team. They've got 5 really good starters. 3 of those 5 starters could be just about anybody's best player. They're just loaded with talent. They don't have any depth beyond that starting 5. So, but as far as 1 through 5, there's nobody in that conference that's better than them. And, they've gone undefeated and proved that. Only team that I think could give them a true run for their money, night in, night out, would be Walnut Ridge, just because they got a young lady named Bailey Augustine that, she scored 49 against Osceola last month. She's unbelievable as well. But anyways, back to the Hoxie Truman game. Truman came out, they slowed things down. They did what they wanted to do. I thought Coach Blue had a great game plan. I thought he won the coaching battle on the night. But at the end of the day, I just don't know if there's just enough talent there on a night in, night out basis to beat Hoxie. They play them 10 times. I could see them beating them 2 or 3, but Hoxie's just very good. Truman they've got a young freshman named Katie Jones. She is going to be a Division I basketball player, barring some sort of injury. She is very, very talented. They just didn't get her the ball enough. Got some good game out of Hannah McLaughlin. She's been big for them all season long, a big shooter for them. Another girl that got a point guard named Caroline Morgan. She's got to shoot the ball. She's just not shooting the ball enough for Truman. She is a really good 3-point shooter. Truman has the capability, if they get everybody clicking on all cylinders, that they could make a run, but at the same time, I could have just as easily seen them not making state, because they're about that third team coming out of their district, and they're going to have to beat a really good team in their region to get in that first round just to make the state tournament. So they're one of those what I'd call on the bubble sort of teams right now that could go either way. But we had those 4 teams, and Mark, as you mentioned, that one of the big games last night was Brooklyn-Blytheville. Brooklyn gets clobbered to Westside and turns around last night. They've already played Blytheville twice, if not 3 times already. And they're of all the teams this season, except for Westside once, they are the team in that conference to take them down to the wire. Last night, they beat them by 2, and very impressive, and ruined the Chickasaws' chances at an undefeated conference record. So kudos to Brooklyn. They're a team that very capable. They're young still. Their 2 best players are juniors. 3 best players are juniors. They got a good sophomore group. They got 3 seniors on the team that all play some, but aside from those guys, they're still pretty young. So they're very capable of pulling off an upset in the district and regional tournament as well.
Yeah, looking over Brooklyn's schedule, they've played Blytheville 4 times this year. They played them in November in the Honda of Jonesboro tournament, which I believe is held at Brooklyn, and that was a 3-point victory for Blytheville. Fast forward about a month, and played Blytheville again. Looks like December 30th, and Blytheville won by 2. Fast forward about 2 weeks after that, early to mid-January, they go to Blytheville, lose by 2 points, and then last night they win by 2 points. So, whatever the formula is to play with and obviously defeat Blytheville, Coach Gross seems to have it figured out for something that frustrates Coach Pierce's team. I'm not sure what it is, because I haven't been able to attend any of these games, unfortunately, but you're looking at 2-point differential in every one of the 4 matchups so far, and that's that the style that they play, though, the style that Brooklyn plays is almost a perfect kryptonite for the style that Blytheville likes to play.
Well, you're exactly right about that, and here's the deal. Mackenzie Pierce hasn't had the experience of prepping for Bobby Gross's style of play, like, let's say, a Mark Whitmire. I mean, and 2, Mark Whitmire has the luxury of having an Avery Phelps or a Riley Felkins if they go off, then here's the deal on that. If they go off on their own 9-10-0 run, Brooklyn's style of play doesn't allow them to play catch up like that. And the deal with Blytheville is they're very deep. They got a lot of talented players, but they don't have a Riley Felkins. They don't have a guy that's going to score 25 to 35 points every night. They're very reliant on all of they got about 7 guys they run out there that all could score 15 to 20 a night. But when you got Brooklyn slowing it down like that, and those guys can't really get into much of a rhythm, I think that has a lot to do with it. And you got to tip your hat to Bobby Gross and what he's been able to do. And another thing on that is, like I said, Brooklyn here, and I've read that as well, and not only seen it, but read in some of the other games where they just haven't shot the ball well at all. So you got to think they've got some good shooters on that team. I know 2 or 3 of them off the top of my head that can shoot. So those shots are going to start falling. You got to believe, and this was you play somebody enough, you're going to beat them. And here's the deal. They're going to end up, I believe, as the 1 and the 4 seed. They'll make the semifinals.
Yeah.
So, don't be shocked if Brooklyn's playing for a district championship.
Yeah, and Ryan, we've talked about it several times on here. Coach Gross has the formula down every year. He schedules up in competition level, and Brooklyn, it may seem at times like they're struggling along, and Coach Gross is sitting back like going to show my age here. He's sitting back like Hannibal with his cigar in the A-team, talking about I love it when a plan comes together, because it's all part of his plan to have his team ready to play spoiler and maybe get a few wins that most people think they shouldn't get come mid to late February right here around tournament time. And those are always the most dangerous teams. Those that they may hover right around the 500 mark all year long, but when February hits and they've had all these experiences and all this tough competition, and it comes time to play somebody for the third or the fourth time, that when you're an opponent of that, it drives you nuts. It raises your stress level up, because you know that you've seen this team enough that they know your tendencies. And when you've got somebody as smart as Coach Gross is about scheming and having the perfect plan to take other teams out of their game, I mean that's not something you want to face this time of year when you're getting down to the win or go home scenario.
No, I agree with everything you just said, and again, you just got to tip your hat to the guy.
Absolutely. He
does a spectacular job. And here's the deal on that. I mean, Bobby Gross hasn't had the luxury of having a Avery Felts or a Riley Felkins or a Colton Watson or one of these stud players. And had he had one of those stud players, he's probably not exactly running that same style of play. And he'll be the first to say, he said, I didn't do that when I was in win. We played different when I was in win. But he said, I want to win, and I'm going to do what I got to do to get the job done. And if that means playing a slow down type of basketball game, that's what we're going to do. But what you got to credit him on is that he's got some talented players, but you're not going to find, first off, in order to do what they're doing, you got to be so fundamentally sound.
Absolutely.
That way.
No doubt.
And that is a testament to him and the amount of time he puts in to working on that with his guys and the way those guys buy in. I mean, you don't see kids showing out or for the most part acting up with him, and they've got his utmost respect. I'm not saying they don't make mistakes. Sometimes, don't get me wrong, but for the most part, I mean, you don't see kids quitting on his teams. They play, and he works them as hard as anybody in this area. So, I just, he does a remarkable job, and you got to tip your hat to him, and especially picking up a win over an undefeated Blytheville team.
Yeah, that's a huge win for the Brooklyn program. Not only on this season but in the program overall, because this Blytheville team, they had basically swept through the conference with, outside of Brooklyn and Westside, they weren't really challenged that much in the conference games this year. The last game they played versus Westside over at the Warrior Dome, I felt like Westside missed some opportunities there in that game that could have put them on the victorious side of it. And, but every time, you look back over the schedule, and every time they've played Brooklyn this year, it's been a 2 or a 3 point game.
Yeah.
And, just when it's that close, there you can always point to 1 or 2 plays that make the difference. And like you said, man, tip your hat to Brooklyn for the big victory last night. That gives them a lot of momentum going into the district tournament next week at Southside.
Yeah, no doubt about that. Now you mentioned Southside.
Yes.
And let's talk about their girls for just a minute.
Yeah, huge win last night.
A bit, and I'm not going to call it an upset, but I'm going to call it a big win. No doubt about it.
Yeah, I would agree. Yeah. Yeah, you're number 1 and number 2 in the conference standings, and basically last night was for all the marbles as far as winning the regular season conference tournament and getting that top seed. Oh, and by the way, they just happen to be bitter rivals as well. So
yes, they do.
If you want to see a rivalry in its truest form, go watch a Batesville Pioneer versus Southside Southerner contest in any sport, and you'll see rivalry right out there. And that was, I was talking to Chris Vines a little bit on social media, who's the voice of the Southerners. And, he was telling me a little bit, last year, the Southside girls were 6-21 last year. And then they come in this year and they're 21-4 and conference champs. So, there's quite a turnaround. They had some girls transfer in, but still, you've got to harness everything. And then, anytime you have new players coming into the environment, it's a coin toss on what it's going to do to your team chemistry. So the fact that they were able to harness everything and get everybody on the same page, you can't say enough about the job that's been done over there. And, and how sweet has it got to be to beat your rival on senior night for the regular season conference title? Does it get much better than that? That's a pretty awesome scenario. And, looking over some of Chris's game notes from last night, London, and I'm gonna try not to butcher her name here, Cuzort, London Cuzort. She got a scratched cornea during the game last night in the third corner.
I believe I saw a picture of that on Facebook.
Yeah,
it looked rough.
It looked pretty nasty. And then, by the way, she scored 23 points in the game with that scratched cornea. So kudos to that young lady for having quite the game last night on one of the biggest stages possible. Let's not forget, too, that, Batesville Lady Pioneers are the defending state champs. And so that's just another element to that rivalry and makes that win just a little bit sweeter for the Lady Southerners. And, so we got to tip our hat to them. And that girls' side, man, that could be – things could get interesting on that side as well. You would have to think now that, you'll probably see the top seed and the number 2 seed, the Southerners and the Lady Pioneers in the finals. But, as we've said before, man, crazy things can happen when it comes district tournament time.
Oh, they definitely can, and regionals for that matter. You see so many good teams get knocked out in that first round because of just the way things aligned, and somebody from the other region got upset. And they end up as a 3 or a 4 seed when they shouldn't have. So you just never know. But great job down there by Southside and completely turning the program around. Both of those teams are very, very capable of making a very deep run in the state tournament, and I'm going to root for them both. I hope they do, and I'm all about a strong representation from Northeast Arkansas, and they're right up there on the list to do just that. Yeah,
it wouldn't surprise me to see those two teams not only meet up in the district finals, but I think there's a chance you could see those two matching up in the regional finals as well. Southside has hit a hot streak here, and they've got a lot of momentum going into the tournament next week. So it'll be interesting to see what happens there. And along the lines of that same tournament, last night as part of our senior night, we had Valley View and Westside. We had the girls' game as well last night, and so those two teams are going to turn around again and play each other in the district tournament starting next week. Yeah. So, within a week, they're going to be playing twice, and Westside came out on the short end of the stick again last night. So, here's my cliche for the day. I'm going to throw in once again about how hard it is to beat the same team 3 times in the same season. So, that could come into play because I thought Westside played a little better last night. I don't think Valley View had their best night from what I've seen of them, but Westside had some opportunities. It was a lot closer game than the one that took place about a month ago over at Valley View. And basically that game was one where anything that could go wrong for Westside did, and anything that could go right for Valley View did. Fast forward to last night, and it was a little different scenario. Neither team played their best game, but Bailey Willis for Westside, I believe, ended up with about 16 points last night. And at one point, early in the first quarter, I believe she had all 10 or all 12 of the points that Westside had at the end of the first quarter. And at halftime, you've had a total of 2 players score for Westside, and they were down, I believe, 4 points at half. So, the overall, I would say that they played better because they were able to stay in the game. But, not being able to get contributions from more than 1 or 2 players, the odds are stacked against you when that happens. If you're only getting, points from a couple different players. Sloan Welch, Lainey Montgomery and Bailey Willis. I believe about halfway through the third quarter, those were the only 3 players that had scored for Westside. So when you have that happen to you, man, that's big to try to overcome that. But the game was still within reach into the fourth quarter last night for Westside, and it wouldn't surprise me to see Westside come up, especially when you get into district tournament, because there are a couple of freshmen that will be moving up. I assume they will be moving up for Westside that could make enough of a difference to help them out in the district tournament. Megan Hedger and Georgia Spinks will both probably more than likely be moving up, along with JJ Gaunt may be moving up as well. But I think those players, if you mix them in with Willis and Welch, those kids have played together for a while, even though you've got some freshmen and some sophomores there. But I think you could see some chemistry come into play there that Westside hasn't had since they lost a couple ladies to injury earlier in the year. Gracie Turpin's been out, and Kanaya Ford, unfortunately, the transfer from Brooklyn, had a season-ending injury that really hit that Westside team hard. She was a major contributor on that team. So
no doubt.
The girls' side will be interesting as well to see what happens there.
Well, I know that, and that is also a factor that comes into play. You got certain freshmen that are going to move up that have been playing junior high all year, and you never that can do nothing but help at least maybe just a little bit, but. Something else I'll mention with Coach Ellis and her group, she has been – I watched them play Brooklyn, who finished in the upper half of that conference. They had Brooklyn beat at home and had multiple opportunities, had opportunities in overtime to win and just couldn't close out. And that's been Valley View's number one problem. That's something that Coach Ellis and I talked about. She said there's been 6 or 7 games this year where could have won. She said, as a coach, you wish you go 3-4, 4-3, but she said we went 0-7. So, she's got that going for her. She's going to use that as a way to motivate her kids and say, hey, we're this close. Let's try and get one and close one out. So, I could certainly see them pulling off an upset as well.
Well, and correct me if I'm wrong here, but I believe they have quite a few sophomores playing on that team. They're a very young team. And so
this is a brand new kind of deal here for with a new coach and Coach Ellis. She's trying to rebuild that Blazer girls basketball program, and she's done a good job. But she's not where she wants to be by any means, and I think they're just going to continue to get better.
Yeah, I think the foundation is being laid right now to bring that program back to the spotlight where it was a few years back. So that's going to be interesting to keep an eye on and watch the job that Coach does over there as well. And just hard transition here, but we'll talk a little bit about the boys' game last night. Man, what a game. I mean, you touched on that a little bit earlier when you were talking about Riley Felkins being on a tear. And, of course, the young man continued it last night. I think he ended up with 32 points on the game and didn't get the game-winning bucket, but got just an absolute Sunday best dish for the game-winning assist over to Andrew Laird. And
was it behind the – it wasn't behind the head. Was it behind the head? It's
kind of a behind his head pass, yeah. So Riley was, standing out near half court, letting the clock run down, and he started
He knew what he was doing.
He knew exactly what he was doing. I mean, what are you going to do if you're Valley View? I mean, you've got a tough decision to make there because they had 4 guys collapse on him as he penetrated into about, I'd say probably he got to about the 8-foot mark in the lane. And 4 defenders crashed around him because pretty much everybody in the building, myself included, thought Felkins has taken the last shot. I mean, how many times have we seen that in the past? So he's going to take the last shot, so we're going to make him score over 4 guys here. Lo and behold, Andrew Laird has the awareness to cut to the basket right on the block. Felkins dishes it down to him over his head, and he gets the layup to go. And then Valley View got a great look at a 3-pointer that would have won the game. It was a 2-point game, 71-69. And Valley View had to go the length of the floor in 3.7 seconds, got the ball down to the wing, and got just an you can't ask for a better look than what they got from 3-point range. And Andy Manus and I were on the call last night, and we talked about this at the end of the broadcast. When the ball left his hand, we both thought the shot was going. I mean, it was on line. It was just a little too strong. You know, I talked to Randy Myers a little bit this morning, who's the voice of the Blazers, and I told Randy, I said, you know, if he's probably 2 steps back, Valley View's probably celebrating a buzzer-beating win on the floor of the Warrior Dome.
I'm with you on that. I was thinking, is that thing about to go in?
Yeah, I mean, it looked like it was going to go in, and you know, and I feel so sorry for the young man because he just kind of collapsed when it went a little long, and you know, Coach Manchester was right there to bring him back to his feet and you know, give him some words of encouragement, and that's a tough way to lose. But on the flip side of that, man, the game that Westside had and Falcons in particular, another 30-point game for him. And then, you know, just basically, you know, like we pointed out, man, he played everybody right into his hands there on that final possession and dished it off perfectly to Laird, and Laird got the layup. And, you know, celebration at Westside last night on senior night. And, I mean, what a way for Riley Falcons to go out on senior night.
Heck of a way to go out. You couldn't have drawn it up any better. So.
And chances are we'll probably see those two teams match up again in the district tournament because Westside's now the 2 seed. They get the automatic bye to the semifinals, but Valley View's right there is at 3 seed. And so, you know. I like it. I like it a lot. You know,
because you look at it this way. Number one, I like the fact that Valley View and Westside will likely play in a big rivalry game in that semifinal matchup, which then would put Brooklyn and assuming there are some other upsets because Batesville, in my opinion, is capable of upsetting one of those teams.
I would agree. Yeah.
But with that being said, then you got the scenario of the one team that's beaten Blytheville is going to have to play to go to the district championship.
Right.
And let's say Brooklyn and Westside get in, well, then you got your top 2 in the finals, or Brooklyn gets in and Westside wins, then you got that huge crosstown rivalry, and Westside will have had to beat 2 big rivalries to win the district. So it makes for some very dramatic high school basketball.
Yeah, the South Side is going to be the hot location for some great basketball, boys and girls basketball next week with all the different scenarios that could play out. You know, I hope the administration over there. I know Mr. Rich over there is getting everything in order. You know, he's a former basketball coach. Actually, was my coach in high school, and so he knows a little bit about getting things ready for the tournament and having everybody on point and ready to deal with all of us crazy fans who may be headed that way.
Yeah. No doubt about it, and it will be crazy.
Oh, absolutely, it will. And you know, I think no matter who makes the finals on either side, I think you're in for some great games. And of course, it'll be a packed house for I would say pretty much every game of the tournament next week will probably be a full house, and with just fans rabid. And you know, everybody turns the intensity up this time of year when it gets to tournament time. Not just players and coaches, but fans turn up the intensity as well.
Oh, yeah. This is what you really wait for. You know, you hear the argument all the time of, oh, well, they need to do away with the districts and the regionals because it takes away the meaning of conference action. And you know, I see that side of the argument, but, you know, there is nothing more fun than these battles that these kids go through for these championship trophies and the meaning behind that. And I hope that never is the case. I'm a huge fan of the districts and the regionals around the world. I mean, you know, they played that sort of thing in the movie Hoosiers. And
absolutely.
You saw how dramatic that was.
Yeah.
So I'm all about it. I personally do not like the way 5A does things. I think it makes things relatively boring towards the end of conference play, especially if things have already been decided. So, you know, it's fun and I'm excited. Want to mention a couple of teams before I get done with this. Number one, the Ridgefield Christian. Well, I don't think we've said anything about them since we've been doing these podcasts. Blake Thompson has done a tremendous job with that program down there. they've got a kid, Garrett Finicum, who is averaging about 27 a game. They are a team, and as I've said before, Ridgefield, and especially under the leadership of Blake Thompson, every year has found a way to one-up themselves. They actually get the 1 seed, picked a big win up over Hillcrest, who was a Final Four team last year, a team that could very easily get back there again this season. But they got a young man named Garrett Finicum who's averaging 27 a game for them. Very, very impressed by him, and especially what Coach Thompson's done. So I expect him to continue to make progress and one-up themselves yet again. And this time I'm calling for them to make a decent run in the state tournament. So that's number one. The other team I want to mention, when I watched play the Yellow Jackets down in Bay play last night, probably the most talented group they have had since one of the groups they had, the last group they had that won a state championship. And that says a lot because they still had some good teams since then. But they are playing very good basketball. They went on the road about a week and a half ago and beat Earl at home by 15. Earl's sitting around with, maybe 5-6 losses on the year total. And then last night they hosted England, the reigning 2A state champions, who are ranked according to Max Preps, however you want to take that, as a top 5 team in the state, and they mercy ruled them. So Yellow Jackets, Brad Brandon's got them rolling. They're another team locally that has a great shot to make a deep run as the year goes on. So didn't want to close this out without mentioning a couple of those teams, and just excited about the year.
Absolutely, and it's always nice to see show a little love to the smaller schools, the single A, double A schools as well. Yeah. We talk a lot of 4A and 5A, but that's kind of the world that we live in with our broadcasts. And anytime I'm always about showing some love to the small schools as a product of a small school myself. So and we talked about Bobby Gross scheduling up and having his team ready come tournament time. Brad Brandon's the same way down at Bay.
Tell you something else, Blake Thompson, he has done the same thing. I mean, I truly believe the reason why he is sitting where he's at right now is because of the non-conference schedule he's played. And I'm going to tell you, he got thumped to some of those really good teams, but you learn from that, and you learn to play, tougher and stronger against those guys. So, that I always appreciate a coach that's willing to put some blemishes on his non-conference record if it means prepping himself for later on this time of year and then potentially getting yourself a conference championship.
No doubt about it. Hey, Ryan, it's going to be fun, man. We got a lot of basketball over the next few weeks, and hopefully some of these Northeast Arkansas teams in every classification will make a deep run into the regional and even into the state tournament. And who knows, we may even have a few of them end up in Hot Springs. Encourage everybody to get out and enjoy some of this great basketball that's going to happen over the next few weeks as we get into tournament time. And for Ryan Fletcher, I'm Marcus Carlton, and you've been listening to the NEA Varsity Podcast.
Thanks for listening to the NEA Varsity Podcast, a production of Ritter Communications, brought to you by Tubetown and NEA Sports. Be sure you're subscribed to the NEA Varsity Podcast to get the latest episodes. Tubetown is a community partnership of Ritter Communications.